Yeah. 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 Yeah.
All right. Welcome to the New World Sounds Show. I am your host, Mike the Millionaire. The New World Sounds Show brings you music from the whole New World diaspora, which includes North, South, Central America, and the Caribbean islands. Tonight's show is going to be very special because my guest is an expert in the world of Calypso music. This gentleman here, his knowledge of Calypso is phenomenal. He is someone that I really admire and really know that you are going to enjoy. So, right about now, without further ado, I am going to bring on the great Trevor Wilkins.
Thank you, Mike the Millionaire. Wow, that is a nice introduction. I mean,
You
that's
deserve it. You deserve it, my brother. I mean, you really, really deserve it, you know.
oh, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, Mike, to tell my story about my book, The Greatest Minds in Calypso Music. Really a Calypso combo of the great Desmond James and the impeccable Trevor Wilkins. And this is just a fantastic opportunity. And also, I want to thank you for reading the book.
Mm.
You read the book and you like it, and you've been calling me and saying, "Hey, Trevor, yeah, you see, you got it right there." Yeah,
But
yeah, you got the hardcover. that is
I,
that.
I actually have the paperback.
Oh, you got the paperback. Okay, all right, that's
Uh,
good.
Now, before we get into this juicy
Yes,
and delicious book,
yes,
I want you to backtrack a little bit
yeah.
and tell the viewers who you are, where you're from, and what you were doing uh, before you were a radio personality. Um, Tell us that story, and we'll lead into the other
Oh, excellent.
topics.
Well, thank you, Mike. Yeah, before I was a radio personality, which is really the Trevor Wilkins show, the greatest calypso show in the world. It's in New York City, and it's on every Saturday night from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. on 91.5 FM WNYE. And next month, we're celebrating our 28th year of playing only authentic calypso music. But prior to being on radio, this journey really started for me. My sojourn started in Trinidad. Back in Trinidad, my brother and I were really into music in the 1960s. I was born in the 60s, and in the 1970s, we started playing music. We were a little DJ in Princeton in Trinidad, and we were playing in all the different little parties like 1975, 1976, and I am originally from Trinidad, as you know, and so we played music for a while in Trinidad for a few years, 5, 6 years, And then in the early 80s, I came to the States with my darling sweet mother to try and get an education, to really try and see if I could improve myself, and also to try to take myself to a whole different level. So I came to New York, and I went to Baruch College in New York City for 5.5 years. I was doing a 9 to 5 job, as a matter of fact, and I was going to night school. So it took me 5.5 years to graduate. I was studying business, marketing, and finance, and I finally graduated in 1990 with a BBA in business and finance, and major in marketing and minor in finance. So that is basically, to the backdrop of what happened. But during that time, I kept my eyes on radio because I knew in my hearts of hearts that I really wanted to be in radio. Radio was exciting. Radio was sexy. Radio was interesting. Radio is really the theater of the mind. You don't get to see anybody on radio. You just got to tell your story and play music. And I had this proclivity, really, Mike, for Calypso music. And I realized that I didn't have a Calypso collection to really play this music. So I started doing talk radio in 1995 at WNYE. I was doing a Monday night show, 1 hour of just talk music. And I was working for the big underwear company at the time, Fruit of the Loom. I don't know if you know that company, Mike.
Oh, yes.
And I used to be in the Bronx. The Bronx was my territory, as a matter of fact. So anyway, I was doing this as a hobby on the side, really just playing a little music, but I was doing a talk show. It was a 1 hour show every Monday night, and I was doing a little talk show. And then, they asked me, hey, you want to do a show on Saturday? Because the way I would do my talk show, I would have 20 minutes of a 20-minute segment of music, and it was only Calypso music. And then from that, I'll try to find a Calypso to sort of segue into talk and take some calls from the audience, But I soon realized, Mike, that talk on radio it's very hard to constructively criticize people on radio relative to talk. So I abandoned talk radio in 1997. A friend of mine told me, hey, why don't you just do some Calypso for the summer of 1997? And that's where it started, Mike. Summer of 1997, I had 1 hour, and I had moved to Saturday, and I was just playing Calypso music in the summer. And I didn't have much records because I brought a bunch of records with me from Trinidad, but it wasn't much. And while I was playing this is where the magic came. This is where the opportunity came to me. And that summer, my 1 hour became 2 hours. And when it became 2 hours, I started to get some really good feedback in the community, the Caribbean community in New York, because, as you know, the Caribbean community in New York is quite diverse, and it's a pretty significant segment of Brooklyn.
Yes, it is.
So we had all the parties going and everything. So I started giving out little flyers to my show. I started running around and trying to meet people and trying to figure out, try to figure out the marketing and how does Brooklyn really work? How does this music play? There were a bunch of big stations that were basically dominating that whole scene. The LIB, WLIB, if you remember, was traditional. They had almost a 20-year experience in Caribbean music, Caribbean broadcasting, Caribbean history. And then you had WNWK, you had WWRL, you had WWVIP with all our Jamaican brothers up in the Bronx. So we had, you had this really culmination of all these different people doing Caribbean and in some form. So I decided, look, I'm going to do a survey, talk to people, run around Brooklyn, and do my own survey with a bunch of my friends to find out what would they really like to listen to when it comes to Caribbean music.
Mm.
And we got our survey came back and say, hey, people want to hear classic calypsos, authentic calypsos, and that's where it started. It was really a miracle. This lady in Brooklyn, Lee Keith, was a big Caribbean socialite. She was popular; everybody knows her. And she heard my show one day, and she said, "Look, I got this brother who has this book on Pan, and I want to bring him into the studio, and you could interview him." And I said, "Yeah, that's fine." I said, "But make sure he brings one of his books for me because I'm trying to read everything I can on Caribbean, on Calypso music and on Trinidad culture, Trinidad history." And when she brought him in, she brought some records. And I said, "Whoa, you have records?" She says, "Yeah." And she had a list of the records she wanted me to play in the order. So I am following this list and talking to this gentleman. And I'm looking at these records and I'm saying, wow, these are just mint condition records. So after the show, I said, "Miss Keith, where did you get these records?" She said, "Oh, there's a guy in Brooklyn called Desmond James. He has the best collection." And I said, "I would love to meet this guy. Can you take me to him?" She said, "Well, call me. So Mike, that was it. I called her like every single day for about 2 weeks. She was busy. She had her sister run a travel agency, and she was highly connected. So she had all these dinners and parties, and she was well positioned in the community. So I finally got to her, and she says, "Okay, Trevor, I'll take you over to this guy," and that's where the magic started.
That's where it started.
That's where it started.
Wow. Now, in the book,
Yeah.
you mentioned a trade school that
Yes.
you went to.
Yeah. Announcers Trading Studio, ATS.
Okay.
Yeah. It was on 42nd Street. Yeah, I spent 9 months there. I got an FCC license and I got a diploma in radio announcement, writing commercials, reading commercials. And I did that in 1981. The first time, just back up a little bit, when I came to New York in 79 for the very first time, I always wanted to be in radio. I was a DJ in Trinidad. So I wanted to go back and be a radio announcer in Trinidad. So I went to, everybody was going, all the big names in Trinidad who were on radio at the time, names like Dave Elcock and Rennie Bishop and all these guys, went to this trade school, ATS, Announcers Training Studio. And they got the skills to come back and work on the radio stations in Trinidad. In those days, Trinidad only had like two radio stations, two FM stations. That's all they had.
Wow.
So I went there and I ran back to Trinidad in 1981, 82 to see if I can get some work on the radio station. And that was not happening. I mean, it was a crowded field. Those guys were really and truly, big names in Trinidad. So I couldn't get in the door. And that's when I decided, listen, this is not making a lot of sense here, trying to bang on this door to get in. So my darling sweet mother was living in New York at the time. She came down and she said, "Look, you gotta come and go to school and try and advance your intellect and improve yourself." So and that's what happened. I left with her in 84, and that's when it started. But I never, after 84, I never really went back to music until 1995. Because within that time, I was trying to get an education. I was going to Baruch. It was extremely difficult to hold on a 9-to-5 job and basically take these business courses in the night.
I remember those days.
Yeah. I mean, but I did it. I mean, I went to 4 summer schools. I stayed with it all the way to the end, and I graduated. And then when I graduated, I went and worked for Z100 in in New York City. Z100 was a major radio station. They went from
Mm-hmm.
worst to first in 60 days back in back in 1990. And I spent 2 years working for them as an account executive selling advertising in New York. So
Oh.
I was writing commercials. I was running around New York trying to sell spots, commercials. So I tried to learn the agency business. In those days, most radio station was bought by agency. They were sold, Madison Square, Madison Avenue had all the big agencies. If you can get an agency that just book you, it was less stress on you trying to build a book and try to find new people to buy into radio. But I was basically a retail guy. I was running around to retail stores, and if they can write a $2,000 check, that would be great. I can run back to the station,
Mm-hmm.
So that's what happened. I was selling radio for 2 years. I stayed with Z100, and then in 1990, late 1992, that's when I went and worked for Fruit of the Loon. I actually, the funny story how I got the job at Fruit of the Loon is that I did a deal with them. I get them to advertise on Z100, and they said to me, "Hey, you want to work for Fruit of the Loon? We got a job, we got a territory in the Bronx, and you'll make more than radio. Why don't you come and work for us?" So in those days, you just try to make the most you can. So I went over and worked for them, and I lasted 6 years. Everybody in the sales department, that was just before they brought in computers and they started doing telemarketing. And once that hit the big companies, they got rid of all their salespeople. So I really, after getting laid off in early 1996, is when I really started thinking about radio. And I came across this radio station in early 19. I was doing it already when I was at Fruit of the Loon, but it was a hobby. It was just 1 hour every Monday night. So I had a relationship with them. And then after Fruit of the Loon, I was able to transition basically easy into WNYE. But the thing is, I had to be able to sell it because I had to buy the time from the radio station, and I had to repackage, sell that time to advertisers in the Caribbean who are interested in Calypso music. So I became an entrepreneur in a way, but less so a kind of DJ or music, So I realized, look, if I'm going to be on radio, because prior to that, I'd been trying to see if I can get work on radio at WLIB, WWRL, WBLS. Kiss FM was around at the time, if you remember. So I was out there trying to see whether or not I can get in, but that door was not opening. So I realized in order for me to get to radio and to do what I want to do, which is to play authentic Calypso music, I got to buy the time and sell it myself. So what I do is I bought the time from the radio station, put out my own money, and I resold that time to advertisers and pay the radio station and keep the show going. That's really what happened.
Wow. Now, in the book, and again, as you all can see,
Yeah.
I have taken. Let's see. I've taken a lot.
It looks like you mark it up, or you got a lot of red in there and yellow.
Marked it up with my pen in
Nice.
many different spots.
Nice.
In many different spots, you can see the.
Yeah, I see you. Like you read it carefully.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned in one part of the book when you were going to the trade school
Yes.
that there was a Caucasian American gentleman
Yes. Yes.
who had
Exactly.
asked you about calypsos and things of that nature, and you discovered that he knew more about the music and the culture than you did. What
Yes.
confused me though
Mhm.
was with Trinidad being like the mecca of
Yes.
calypso music. How
Right.
was that you didn't have a thorough grasp of the music and the culture?
Well, it's interesting. What he had was more, the history um, that
Mm.
I didn't have because,
Ah.
and what he had was books.
Mm.
So when I met this gentleman, I met him over at ATS. He had he had bought a little radio station in Guaria in Venezuela,
Mm.
and the point of the radio station was to serve the Caribbean.
Okay.
So he upgraded the radio station, put in a bigger transmitter, and he was broadcasting. And he hired me to put the music together.
Mm.
But when I met him and we started talking about Trinidad, I was, I was pretty young. I was early 20s, and I he started talking about people in Trinidad that I knew Dr. Williams, and I
Mm.
knew a bunch of you know, um, the music, but
Hmm.
I didn't know the 1960s. I was born in the 60s. I didn't know the
Okay.
50s.
Mm.
I didn't know anything about the founding fathers of Calypso music.
Ah.
And I knew the 70s, and the 80s. So the early 80s. So when he started talking about the history of Trinidad, and that was something I honestly didn't learn in school in Trinidad in high school.
Mm.
We study, your American history, English history, that kind of stuff. Not really
Mhm.
Trinidad history.
Mm.
Maybe now they teach that in Trinidad. But
Mm.
he had books, and he had books, Michael Anthony's books. He had, and he was telling me, and he said to me, which I remember today. He said, "I think I know more about Trinidad than you."
Mm.
And that changed my life. From
Mm.
that day, I said to myself, no one is going to tell me about my history and my culture, my music,
Yeah, yeah.
you know? And he
Mm.
said, look, pick it. He gave me the books. He had,
Mm.
he had, um, he had three books, one from Michael Anthony, one from Errol Hill, um, and he had another book. And I took those books, I read those books. And from that day, Mike, my quest was to learn everything I can about Trinidad.
Mm.
And I went, I just started buying everything I can and read everything.
Mm.
When I finally got to the show and I found Brother James, Desmond James, the undisputed father of the show, with his
Mhm.
collection, it was another learning experience. It was like I'm meeting the same white man again in a different form.
Gotcha.
Because James started talking about the 50s and the big bands and the Fitzvaughns and Sel Duncan, and I don't know anything about Sel Duncan, man. I didn't know anything about the 40s, and so I was back in school again.
Mm. Mm.
And that's when I decided that I had to just go back now and not just understand the history, but understand the music on an intellectual level. So
Mm. Mm.
I went back and I bought V.S. Naipaul book collection. I bought um, Michael Anthony's collection. I started reading Earl Lovelace. I started reading everything on Calypso's. I mean, Chuck just had three books. I read them all, and I just started reading as much as I can to help me understand what I am doing. Because
Mm.
playing this music is one thing, is understanding the period, understanding the time, realizing the depths of the music. And these guys, when you listen to the music of the 50s, that decade, that nifty 50s, it's completely different to the evolution is unreal in the 60s,
Mm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to go back and research Kitchener, get all his music, and this is where the boss man Desmond James came in. I became his understudy
Mm.
because he had this unbelievable collection. So
Mm.
he says, we will play music all day, all night, and he'll hold my hands and say, "You never heard this, right?" And I'm like, "No, I know it now." And he'll put me down. He says, "Sit, listen to this," and and you start realizing really how important the music really is and how it changed with the times,
Mm.
and it start telling you stories and it start telling you about yourself. That was one of the, it. I started to realize why I say the things I say, why I behave the way I behave, you
Mm.
know. And yeah, so that white gentleman who's still my friend today,
Oh wow.
yeah, really opened my eye,
Mm.
and he knew more about Trinidad than I did,
Mm.
and I was in my 20s, and I realized from that day I have to read my history. I have to write my history. I have to understand my history, you
Mm.
know, because it was a mind opener. It was eye popping. I had to step back and say, "Wow, you read these books. You know about these guys. He knew when the Chinese came to Trinidad. He knew when the Indians
Mm.
came. I mean,
Wow.
So I had to go back and read Dr. Williams' book and get an understanding. I have to read V.S. Naipaul. I go back to C.L.R. James, and C.L.R. James has some interesting books on Trinidad, and I had to read all that to try and get myself up to the standard to make the best presentation of the show.
Mm.
You know,
Wow.
but
Now,
yeah,
I'm sorry. Before we proceed with the show, I must give a shout to my grandmother,
oh yes,
Jean Soso. Okay. Because now growing up,
yes.
my grandmother, she is a calypsoholic.
Calypsoholic. Bookaholic, calypsoholic.
And so now that's how I discovered your show because see, I've been listening to your show from the beginning and,
Really?
from the
Thank you.
beginning, from the very beginning. And I have to thank my grandmother for that.
Right.
And now the thing is that she, see, I've missed shows,
Yeah, yeah.
but she doesn't miss one show. She'll call me and say, "Hey, you listen to Trevi tonight?" I'm like, "No, not tonight. I'm trying to make it home, but you know,
Oh my God.
hurry up and get home." You know,
Yeah.
you know, she doesn't miss one show.
That is
So I
fantastic.
definitely must give
Yes,
her a shout.
Gene.
And I'll say that your show, see, one of the reasons, and I also will say that I call myself a student
Yes.
of your Calypso University because your show is like a university. And also, to me, you are an outstanding DJ. Let me tell you why.
Thank you.
I'm going to tell you why. Because, number one, when you do your shows, you not only play music, anyone can play music, anyone can grab a record and put it on a turntable and play it. But that doesn't make you a good DJ. Now, when I listen to your show, you talk about the record, you talk about the artist, You talk about
Yes.
the year the composition was made. You give a bio of that particular artist. You even talk about when they competed and when they won the crown and this, that, and the other.
Right.
That's what makes a good DJ. Because I listen to radio stations of, and it's not just calypso, but many genres.
Yes.
And even across genres, these days, you don't hear DJs doing that. That's a lost art. You
Yes.
know, and I get upset sometimes because I hear music that I like, and I'm like, oh man, what was that was playing? But they don't talk about it. They don't say who the artist was or anything, you know.
Yeah.
So that's why I really appreciate your show, because you give an education, and that's why I tell everybody, I say I'm a student of Trevor Wilkins's Calypso University. Talk about that. Now, did you learn that at the at the DJ school?
No, actually, it's funny. I learned that on my own. Actually, I developed that
Mm.
um, based on just reading about these guys. And there's some wonderful books about Professor Rudolph Otley has 3 books on women in calypso, also from then to now, which individualize each calypsonian and they tell their stories. So that was one place I got a lot of information. Then Parade of Carnival with Michael Anthony's book, that is a Bible. And then also Professor Rollet's book from the University of West Indies. It's like 600 pages. That book goes back to the founding fathers, and it tells you, what Lion was, Executor, Beginner, Houdini, Attila, and what those guys did, and where they came out, how they were able to perform, how they were able to leave, Houdini, all these guys. So what I did basically, Mike, is, if I play in Sparrow, and I played Sparrow 1956, and that's when Sparrow came on the scene with Gene and Dinah, and the rest is history. Sparrow became extremely famous, right? I go back and I read 1956, and Sparrow came on the scene. He was a young guy. He were in jail with Blakey and Melody and them boys. Came out in 55, made this calypso. They sang the calypso in jail, but he came out before them, so he sang the calypso. And Gene and Dinah, Rosita and Clementina, right? So the audience got to know, the foundation of that calypso. They have to know why Sparrow sang that calypso, and if you go 3-4 decades and you listen to Sparrow's Capitalism Gone Mad, you have to understand that was 1983. You have to understand why Sparrow sang Capitalism Gone Mad.
Yeah, that's how I love that song. Yeah. To be totally honest with you, Trevor, that song is relevant to today in New York or in the USA, period.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. I mean, I played a calypso the other day by Short Pants called "The Law Is an Ass." That calypso they banned in Trinidad, but we played here. And if you look at the kind of verdicts, the kind of understanding you get, you have to conclude that Short Pants was onto something, But yeah, I mean, so when you playing calypso music, Mike, you got to look at the decade. You got to look at the period, because it's the only way you could get an understanding why Sparrow sang Education in 1967. Why is it that Kitchener sang The Best Thing in Life's Are Free in 1968? What's the genesis behind that? What is he trying to get across to me? Why did Kitchener came back to Trinidad in 1963 and made this vainglorious return to calypso music after spending 16 years in England? What was the trigger here? What got him back to come back and basically change calypso forever? Because Sparrow was ruling calypso from 56 to 63. Kitchener was in England at the time, So I got to understand 56 to 63 because there was only two major big names. That was Melody, the undisputed king, Melody, his lordship, we call him, right? And Sparrow, you know. And then you look at the proliferation of the big band, the explosion of that in the 1950s. Go down the list was Sonia and Sel Duncan, Clarence Cove, and Joey Lewis and his brother. And I mean, just a plethora of big bands. And this is prior to the combo that came in the 60s. You know, the Solid Sevens and the Spring Streams and a bunch of these small combo bands, because the big bands were so big, it was hard for them. The logistics of getting them out in the communities was a big deal, you know. So they started getting smaller, but they were doing backup singing, backup vocals and music for these guys. And then when you talk to Calypsonians, Mike, and you read their story, and you realize that they don't play any instrument. A lot of them can't play an instrument. So, but the music was so infectious. The music was just unbelievably, you know. I mean, when you know people talk about reggae music, and you know, Calypso before reggae was you know was famous. I mean, the Andrews sisters singing Rum and Coca-Cola, you know. We call him the pugnacious Lord Invader. He got paid all this money in Harlem. They used to call him Mr. Harlem. He used to dress in Harlem and all of that. But the whole that history of the musicians, you know, that really shaped the Calypsos. One of the things that I learned from the Desmond James, the Professor James, the boss, I said, boss, who's playing this music? I said, because when you look at the records, and I think it's in my book, you look at some of the records in the 60s, they all say it's, you know, it was composed and music arranged by Sparrow or Kitchener or composer or Duke or Melody. I mean, you know, but in fact, when you go back, you realize it was composed by Frankie Francis from Telco. It was composed by, you know, Joey Lewis. It composed by Professor Adekoto was in the 1970s. But you had all these major, Clive Bradley had all these major musical genius. They were splendiferous, really, when you think about it, Mike, because they were writing the music. These guys were just performing and singing. And the music, when you think about the music, when you think about Kitchener in 67, and singing 67, you know, Tina, why you sleeping? This is Juve morning. You know, when you think back to that, that was Ron Berridge and his brother doing the music. You know, you know, Sparrow in 68 with Mr. Walker, Come to See Your Daughter. That was Ron Berridge again and his orchestra, his brother putting that music together for Sparrow. So I just thought that as you look deeper into the music, deeper into the culture, deeper into Calypso history, you realize that the musicians never really got, you know, the publicity, but and the fame and glory, you know, but they were vainglorious relative to the music that they produce, you know. So that is why when I play a Calypso, I want to tell you that this music was done by Professor Adekoto. This music was done by Clive Bradley. This was Papa Bull Nelson, 1980, when he sang Disco Daddy. That was Clive Bradley. Yes, you know Disco Daddy, right? That's a bad piece of music. Nice.
Lord Nelson.
Yeah, you know, I mean, so you think about even some of the Calypsonian that came from other islands like Short Shirt and Swallow. You know, Swallow music, a lot of Swallow music. Frankie McIntosh and the Equitables did that music for Swallow. You know, you know, when you talk about Satan coming down and Subway Jam, Ramajee on the Parkway, you know. So Yeah, so that is why I make it a point when I write my story and I make my list for my calypso, and I'm strategizing here. I'm saying, okay, what can I say about Brigo relative to this calypso? Well, he did it in 1968, and started singing in 66, made his first record in 67, came back with a hit in 68. This was the hit. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So people get a sense of something. I
Mm-hmm.
want you to dance. I want you to think. I want you to have a good time.
Mm-hmm.
But I also want you to get a sense of the music, somewhat try to reach you, educate you in some way that we have to keep understanding the fundamental value of our music. You
Mm.
know, we when we you hear radio stations, as you say, they will play a James Brown, but they won't tell you James' story.
Right, right.
Or what year James sang, the big payback. What year did he do that? Uh, and I think you try to tell the young people today who want to be in music, at least try to play an instrument or
Mm.
and try to understand the history of music,
Mm-hmm.
particularly the genre you want to go into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Uh, Now, see, before listening to your show,
Yes.
before I discovered your show,
Yeah.
I had a cousin that passed away,
Oh, so sorry.
and he had a nice collection
Really?
of music. So, I used to raid my cousin's, little stash, my
Yeah.
cousin Darlene, and I would borrow the records, and I thought I had a nice Calypso collection. I was like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Look at this, man. Yeah, nobody can mess with me. But Calypso was. Then I
Yes.
discovered your show. I said,
Yeah.
man, I don't know nothing about no Calypso. In your book, you
Yeah.
talk about this Desmond James. He's like this kung fu master in the mountains,
Yeah.
who's better than all the grandmasters out there, And
Yeah.
it had me. I couldn't put the book down. I was reading it, because
Yeah.
he's like this monk in the mountains.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, wow. And you talk in here about how he was like the father of the show, and here I'm showing in the book. And
Yes.
when you showed this collection of records here, I said,
Yeah.
I will never talk about my little stash of Calypsos again.
Yeah.
Now, if y'all can see in TV land, if y'all can see how many books this is incredible. This is like something that should be in a library.
Yes, it's a record. That's records. Yeah. Yeah. Mike, a quick story on that. When I saw that collection,
Mm-hmm.
when Miss Keith took me to his house, his brownstone in Brooklyn, and they told him Trevor Wilkins was coming, the guy from the radio.
Mm-hmm.
And I get to the brownstone, his little daughter, opened the door for me. And she said, I say, oh, good evening. I'd like to see Miss Keith. So she said, oh, she's here. Come on in. I go in there, and there was a bunch of people in this living room, this big living room. And they were like, his wife, Linda, um, his daughter, Keisha. I think his son was there. Frankie was there. Miss Keith was there, and about two other guys. I can't remember. I've seen them now. I can't remember the name, but they were there hanging out, listening to music. And when I walked in that room, Mike, I saw that collection. I almost passed out. I mean, it was so intimidating. I was scared.
Mm, mm.
And he said to me, Dr. James said to me, aha, you never see anything like this, huh? You never see anything like this. I said, no. Listen, Mike, that thing scared me because that was just so beyond my thinking. I mean, it was so, it was like being in a cathedral or being at the library on 42nd Street. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it was that extensive, and I was shocked when I saw it. I mean, I'm flabbergasted, right? And and he said, "Come on in, sit down, you know." You talk about babash. We have babash here, and bring out babash from Trinidad. That's a local drink in
Mhm,
Trinidad. And
mhm,
I'm looking and I saying to myself, "Whoa,
mm,
how do you?" And he knew every record. It was alphabetized. You could
mm,
find any record. I mean, in less than 15 seconds, he will find you Sparrow 1957. He will find you Kitchener in London 1955. He would
mm,
find you the founding fathers on the big old 78s, Attila Beginner. I mean, don't talk about the 70s and the 80s. I mean, he had that covered like a blanket.
mm,
And I I look at this and I say, where do he says, well, you could come every time and we'll play and you'll play some of the music and you could take some and go play it on your show and bring it back when you finish. And I said,
mm,
that okay, that's great.
mm,
So the problem I had is that when I keep going to him, I don't know what to ask for. I don't
mm,
know where to go.
mhm,
And that's where I started to say, okay, I need to read more books on Calypso.
mm,
And I need to read them in some kind of order
mm,
to learn the music now. So after a year and a half, I start going back to the boss and I say, boss, what about what about Skipper? You have any Skipper? And he said, wow, Skipper? I said, yeah, I was reading Old's book and he talk about Skipper and he talk about Just Day and he talk about all these different stuff. Skipper. He said, no, yeah, he just brought about 1545s of Skipper and just handed it to me. He said,
mm,
that's Skipper there.
mm, mm,
56, 57, 58, 61, 60. Just, so because it was very difficult, Mike, to try to figure out the collection. It took me years to understand that collection. I
mm,
know it now.
mhm, mhm,
I go there now and I can find anything I want. But it took me years just to acclimate my mind
mm.
to this collection.
Wow.
And that's where the study came in. But he was the master. He had the brain power. Because he was collecting Kaiso since in the 40s.
Ooh.
He was an older gentleman, of course, but really really classy fella.
Mm.
Know all the Calypsonians. When the Calypsonians then came to New York, they would go over by him to
Wow.
hear records they don't have.
Mm,
And he'll put it on a little CD for them or put it on a cassette for them because they don't have it.
mm,
Right. And I had to go, I used to go 3 times a week. Sometimes I would stay there all until 2 in the morning, just
mm.
playing music with him, just listening. And he will be telling me about the music. This one was in the tent, and he used to have sometimes a little problem with the year. And I would say, no, boss, I think that was 72 or
Mm.
68, because I was good with numbers. So I was figuring out the years.
Mm,
And then we start seeing patterns.
mhm,
And then he starts showing me themes.
mm,
And I would say, boss, I want to do a calypso on wine. You say, you want to do a calypso on wine? You say, okay, all right. I go over there and he has 10 calypso,
mm,
wine on something, wine on me, Nani wine, and a list of calypso. So we did not, the theme is wine, and
mhm,
we found 12, 15 calypso on wine.
mm, mm,
Okay. So you go and you said, boss, I want to do something, pick a theme. I want to do something on politics, or I want to do something on society. He will just go through his book and give you 15 calypsos on that.
mm,
So let's say you want to do something on Labor Day weekend coming up.
mhm,
Okay. You have Ramager on the Parkway. You have Brooklyn Carnival. You have Brooklyn Woman. You have just a host of music.
mm,
Parkway Rock by Rootsman, and you can find 11, 12 calypsos on one theme.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that's when it started clicking. That's when I realized I'm onto something. Because
Mm.
now we could make a case
Mm.
when we go to play the music.
Right. Yeah, that's one thing I like about your show too, is because anytime I listen to your show, each show is a theme.
Yes.
And like, oh, okay. And I remember one time you did a theme on Shango Calypsos.
Yes.
You played Lord Nelson. That was my first time I ever heard. I was like, oh man! And at that time I was listening to the show on the radio, so we had cassettes. I
Yeah.
ran. I said, "Oh my God!" I looked for a cassette. I was trying to get to the radio. I was rushing, tearing things up, trying to get to the cassette deck, and I caught it like about 30 seconds in. I said, yeah, I got it.
Yes. Yeah. And that was just my favorite. It's funny that Shango show came out of just we were just looking one day, and I said, it was coming up. It was like Shango time, around this time or a little later. And I said, boss, I saw Shango Vision by Chalk Dust. What we have on Shango? He said, man, we are real Shango. I said, really? He said, yeah. And we went from Shango Vision, and then Nelson Shango that you like. That was Papa Bull. That was our boss. He's Shango, right? And we just started finding Shango's Calypso. Scribby have Shango. I mean, it's really nice piece of music, right? And then it's like the same thing. We decided, okay, after that Shango show was so successful, we decided to do a spiritual Baptist show.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, with Crow have Baptist better, and you have Blue Boy, of course, Soca Baptist. But you start seeing how the music makes sense.
Yes.
You see that you see how the music, and then in certain periods in a particular year, you could have about 5 Calypsonians singing about the same thing. So you look at the discontent in Trinidad in 1970, the height of the Afromania, the Black Revolution movement, Stokely Carmichael, those guys, Kwame Ture, and you could find all these Black calypsos. So Black History Month, we can do Black is Beautiful by Duke. We could do a Black Man's Cry. We could do Black Man Killing Black Man. We can do Black Man Feeling to Party. That's Black Stallion. Black man don't get anything easy in this world. That's Black Stallion again. He's the black man of all black men, So you start to see how you can really bring the music together and enlighten the folks and get your message across so they can see really the value in this music. I mean, I think that was something I miss as a young man. When I was growing up, I like all kind of music. I like James Brown. I like Michael Jackson. I mean, I like all, in Trinidad, you like that, right? But it's only when I started studying my own, I realized how really and truly incredible that music is. So sophisticated, so beyond. It's a whole different type of music. It's and that's why the music is so hard to cross over. It is not an easy music to
Right.
to really understand or comprehend, because the music can tell you about a certain period. It could tell you about what was happening in Trinidad, and if you're not living in Trinidad, you really can't figure it out, Mike. But then when you get these when they make these more general topics like education and capitalism and they go into those kind of areas, it is a whole different ball game. Shango, spiritual Baptist, a lot of folk songs. One thing I learned is that it's just all that music was bubbling up in Trinidad.
Mm,
in after World War II,
mm,
really post World War II. We had all this music. We had music before, but there was really a proliferation after World War II in Trinidad. I
mm,
mean, the big bands were raging, the Calypsonian were raging. Steel Pan came in the 50s.
mm,
That's
mhm.
a whole nother show. You know?
Right, right, exactly. That's all. And we definitely going to do a part two. This is not going to be the first. And three and four. But
Well,
the music is that extensive.
yeah, and and that's why Jean's, your grandma, you love the show, and because they know that period, they know that time,
Yeah, 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 definitely. Yeah, she
and
just turned 90.
yeah, so she's 90, so she knows that music. She knows Sel Duncan. She probably know him personally, you
Mm,
know, and she know Coven, she know Clarence Coven, she knows Joey Lewis, you know, she knows all these big band players, which then dovetail into the whole calypso genre, and you have, what made calypso so interesting is the music. The musicians were also, these guys were reading music, writing music,
exactly.
you know that's what really you know um propel this music to a whole new level. you know you hear the horns, you hear, you people have, you feel the rhythm, the percussion, you have a vibe in there. you
Hmm.
know there's a spirit in that music.
Hmm.
Look, some of the music I can't even play because it interferes with me. If I play Ella Andel, I had to be careful because you know I mean, she could just get right into you, and and you kind of lose your balance. You lose your equilibrium. What I mean?
Yeah.
But I mean, the music is quite rewarding, and it's extremely deep.
Mm.
You know.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Now, when you were living in Trinidad,
Yeah.
was there ever a calypso show that was as extensive and thorough as your calypso show?
That's a good question, Mike. That's an excellent question. I don't think I've ever heard one in Trinidad
Mm,
or anywhere in the world. Not in England, not in Florida,
mm,
not even in the islands. Um, I've never heard a calypso show where people actually take time to study the music, uh, study the period of the time, tell us the year, tell us how this calypso came about, give us, some semblance, some understanding of the music. You
mhm,
know, it was they would just play something and move to something else, and one of the things these guys would do, they would never play a song in its entirety. They would not play the whole song. They will butcher it. They'll play two verses, three verses, go to the next one, the next one, the next one.
mm,
Trying to pack it in. You know, um, I don't do that. If I can't play the whole record, I just don't play it. And then in calypso, you have all these big 45s. But to
mhm,
answer your question, no, you know, in Trinidad when I was growing up, you hear a lot of calypso carnival season.
mm,
And that's basically the new carnival hits or the new carnival songs. After carnival, you don't hear, I mean, you hear one or two, but they play R&B role. I mean, there's a favorite calypso I play all the time when I do my fund drive. I do 2 fund drives every year to try to raise funds to pay for my airtime from the radio station because I'm on FM, and FM airtime is seriously expensive.
mhm,
It's it's very costly. So when I do my fund drives twice a year, I play. Relator has a great calypso called Radio Station,
mm,
and I play that calypso to tell the audience, you know, that we should be happy we hearing calypso here
mhm,
in New
mhm,
York City
mhm.
because they used to beg the radio stations in Trinidad to play calypso music. All right,
Mm.
the radio station would not play your music. All right, I mean, people used to beg them just to play a calypso. So,
Wow.
I try to convey that to my audience, so they will step up and support because, you know, you enjoy the show, you like the music, you get the history, and the show is really research,
Mm-hmm.
Mike. What I do is just research all the time. I'm living for it, so I'm researching Calypso all the time.
Mm.
And sometimes someone tells me about a Calypso that I haven't played, and I go back to the galaxy of Calypsos. Is pretty incredulous, right? It's just all
Mm.
this music, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and I will still come across someone who says, hey, um, you didn't play this, like I'm looking for Lamentation by Short Shirt, the Antiguan sensation. Now he did that in 79, but his big album is Tourist Lego, which you probably know, 76. But but you see, the thing is that I think we don't take the time to really appreciate what we have done as a people.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
we don't see fundamental value in what we have done over the years, and it's somewhat painful sometimes
Mm-hmm.
to see this music been sitting on a shelf for all these years,
Mm-hmm.
and you play it for your friends or if your friends come over, but it's not being broadcast out there so the world can hear it and
Mm.
realize that a small island like Trinidad had just incredible musicians, incredible writers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just awesome performers. Um, you know,
Mm.
and today's a whole new world.
Right, right, exactly, exactly.
But that's not my fight. You know?
Yeah. Now, there, um, there's a lot of. I think you talk about this in the book too. Uh, Caribbean radio stations that that we no longer have anymore,
Yeah,
and even like I was, I used to listen to the Jamaican radio station, Irie Jam,
Irish Jam.
40,
Yeah, right,
and
right. Squeeze and those guys. Mhm.
right, squeezing them, yeah, yeah. And so I one day I turned on the radio station. It was all Spanish music, which
So,
is nothing. I love Spanish music. Don't get me wrong. I love Latin music. I love the whole,
right,
But I was at trying to find, the reggae, and
right.
so I was like, wow, what happened? And then
Mhm.
I called my uncle, and he said now they're doing it online or something like that, or you have to get an app or something like that, you
Right.
know, and just how do you
Well,
convey to how can you convey to your audience, your listeners, the fact that what you do can be at risk of falling into the same fate? What can they do to prevent
mhm.
that from
Wait,
happening?
yeah. Well, first, we see this over and over, Mike, where you know, I mean, LIB has been around for 30 years, and
Hmm.
that is now Spanish. Okay, there's 7 Spanish radio stations in New York City. But what it says is that we as a people don't really support our stuff. We don't support our music, our history, our culture. And that's what happened to WVIP with Irie Jam and Squeeze and
Hmm.
and all those guys over there, Ras Clem and all those guys. They wake up one morning and the station was sold because they couldn't sell the airtime.
Hmm.
And the problem we have in our community, and we see with the LIBs of the world, WWRL, WNWK, is that we can't get the sponsors to step up.
Mm.
And despite our folks have real wealth in our community, I mean, a lot of wealth in our community. I mean,
Hmm.
the Jamaicans did well, the Trinidadians did well. They've been here 60, 70 years. They have brownstone and everything, right? But the thing about it is that we believe this music is free. We feel we're entitled to it.
Mm.
So, when you get an advertiser or you go to a restaurant in Brooklyn or you go to these people, they sometimes feel like they're doing you a favor. as opposed to advertising and people coming in the door. You know, they don't see the value of advertising. So it increasingly became difficult for guys to raise money and pay for the airtime because all these guys are independent. They buying the time from the radio station. And radio stations, when you go to them, Mike, there are 21 big radio stations in New York City. You go to them and you say, hey, let's just do a Caribbean format 24 hours. They would tell you that, hey man, that has no there's no commercial value there. You know? So why would we do it? You know, they rather do classical, they would do rap, they would do, I mean, there's 7 Spanish radio stations. They cannibalizing each other. But again, this is our fate, right? Because we're not stepping up. I mean, I raise funds twice a year, and it's enormously difficult. It's very challenging. You know, just the mindset going in to raise the fund is unbelievable. Like,
I heard you on the radio 2-3 weeks ago when you were doing the drive, and I felt your pain. I felt it, you know. And actually that night I was trying to leave a donation, but I was having difficulty on the computer.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah.
I said, man, I gotta show Trevor some support, you know, but it just didn't work out. So I had to send it via mail.
Yeah, thank you so much. But Mike, that's to answer a question. That is the problem, is that, you know, we can't get anybody to buy in. And if you go to people, you run around Brooklyn and you say, okay, man, we can buy a radio station, right? We can have our own. Okay. I mean, I wanted to work for LIB and they wouldn't open the door for me. So I decided to go out and buy my airtime. And next month, Mike, is 28 years I'm doing the show. You know?
It's been about that long, right?
Yeah, and I'm running all over Brooklyn trying to sell anyone who wants to buy some spots to put on the air, you know, so I could pay the radio station, because the month I don't pay them, I'm off. You know, plus I encourage people to buy the book, you know. So you got that. So those guys, thank you, Mike. So it's very hard to sustain yourself in the business, and that's why our Jamaican friends couldn't do it. The Caribbean folks on LIB couldn't do it. I mean, they couldn't do it on WWRL. That's all Spanish. WNWK is now classical, you know, and that is what we're dealing with. And yet, you know, look, my radio station, 91.5 FM, WNY, I made this case years ago. The Greeks buy time on my station. They have 21 hours.
Wow.
21 hours. And that's a smaller community than the Caribbean community. But it's an affluent community. They know what the Greek culture means, what the Greek music means. And they can afford 21 hours a week. I got 3 hours a week, you know, paying over $28,000 a year. So just imagine what they're paying. But yet they do it year after year after year. Wow. And I, you know, so this is the crux of the problem. Is these shows are really interesting and nice and people love them.
Yes, they are.
You know, but you know, how you deal with the financial challenge to keep those shows going, that's a whole nother story, you know, because that's the thing. And now there's basically nobody on FM. I'm the only person in New York City on FM radio station playing Calypso music. There's nobody on FM. If you hear someone on FM, it's a pirate.
Okay.
It's a bunch of pirate radio stations now in Brooklyn. They're wrong.
Right.
And in the Bronx, in Queens, you know.
Yeah, I do hear them too. Yeah.
Pirates, yeah.
But those are pirate stations. Okay.
Yeah, you know, but they're not legitimate, they're illegitimate, and you know, they could be thrown off at any point, any time. They can, you know, that's illegal, you know, that's stealing their time to play soca music or Caribbean or reggae music or whatever. you know.
Mhm.
But that's the challenge
Mm.
that you deal with every day, you know, to keep it going so that people can relax on a Saturday, like your grandmom,
Mhm.
90 years old, and
Mhm.
listen to some really good music that
Mhm.
she knew that you know, she danced to some of those music, you know,
That's
she
right. That's
remembered,
right.
you know, she's laughing when she hears the stuff, you know.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, she's happy, man. When that Calypso is playing, oh my God, big smile on her face. She is happy.
uh, Mike, this was exciting. This was really great. This was, you know, I thank you for this opportunity, my
Oh
brother,
yeah,
because
yeah,
you know,
definitely.
you know, I'm a radio guy. I don't really do TV and all of that. I mean, you know, so I mean, when you told me about this the other day, I was like, oh, you know, I don't know, you know, I don't do interviews, and but see that you say it's relative to your book. I say, oh, okay, great.
Yeah, yeah,
So you
yeah.
know, so I hope folks go out and buy the book, The Greatest Minds in Calypso Music, The Impeccable Desmond James. Yes, show it again. Calypso combo steel man, you
It's
know.
well worth it, people. Listen, what Trevor does is very important, and a lot of people, those of us who are in media, film, radio, and things of that nature. A lot of times, this is a labor of love that we're
Yeah,
not even
exactly.
making money from.
Yeah,
The least
exactly.
you could do
Yes,
is send a donation to the show so that he could keep it running. You
yes,
know, buy the book. As soon as I heard you on the radio talking about the book, I said, "Oh man, I got to get that book.
yeah,
I got to get that book because the radio station is important to me. The show, your
yes,
show is important
yeah,
to me. So I said I have to support. You know.
exactly. And you know, my quick question, quick little story. You know, that book took me 2 years to write because
Mm,
when James passed away, which was October the 20th, 2021, from the COVID complications, right?
mhm,
I, from that day, that night, I did a show about him. And I
mm,
started writing that book that night. And
mm,
I said I had to, because he was such, I mean, he was my life. You know,
mm,
I mean, I was the understudy, he was the professor.
mm,
And
mm,
I would be in his house 3, 4 times a week. His
mm,
wife would come and meet me there, leave me there, and I still there. Okay.
mm.
And all we did was Calypso every day.
Wow.
Okay. And he was my compass. He was my guiding light.
Mm,
He
mm,
held my hand and take me to this level.
mm,
I mean, it was a renaissance for me. It
mm,
was, you know, I was reborn when I saw him because I went back to that same white brother I told you about who
mhm,
I didn't know anything about Trinidad. And then when I met James, I realized I don't know anything about Calypso music,
mm, mm, mm,
you know? So when he passed, man, I had to write his story,
mm,
write something about what he meant to me and how he made the show. And this show's still going today in his spirit.
mm,
Because when, you know, the times we spent together, I mean, it was just unbelievable. I mean, he was my professor. I
mm,
call him boss. I said, boss, I just don't understand 1970 to 1975. He
mm,
said, sit down. Let me play you 1970 to 1975. Let me
mm,
play you all the people who won the Monarch in 1970,
mm,
1971, 1972. Let me walk you up that road. So then you could try now and figure you see what I'm saying? So
mhm,
I had to write a book about him and give him his due and thank him for really making who I am today and the determination to keep Calypso going in New York City.
mm,
Um, it was an unbelievable 22 and a half years with James.
mm, mm,
Um, just just music every day. You name it, he had it. He even had some good understanding about reggae music, you know.
mm.
You know,
Wow.
but my selfish need at the time was just calypso music down
Right.
the road. So I mean, and that was his forte.
Mm.
That I was in his house. You see, you know. But I
Yeah,
had to write
because
something.
now for those who are watching,
Yeah,
now again, I talked about my little small collection of calypsos. And so in his book, you see this collection here that you're looking at, right? Okay. Now, this, from reading, now this is according to your book,
Yes.
this is all Calypso, no other
Yes.
genre. My
Yes,
little
exactly.
collection had other genre. They had reggae in it as well.
Yeah, that's all Calypso. It's the most intimidating thing you will ever see, Mike, in your life.
Mm,
You know, that thing. It
mm.
will scare the dickens out of you. And you know, the interesting, he built that with his own hands.
Wow.
And he never went to college. And he
Wow.
was able to alphabetize it.
Mhm.
Put it in. I mean, that's James.
This is him here.
Yeah, that is the boss. I mean, this is how brilliant this fella was to build this collection that no one has, to put it in order and built it with his own hands, collect the records.
Mm.
Every time I think about him, you know, I basically cry every time I think about him
I
because
could imagine, man.
you know what he has done, man. I mean, if he didn't open his door to me and give me a real Calypso education, I couldn't keep this show going today. You know,
You have some people who are viewing the show.
oh really? People view that? Mike, I
Yeah,
thought you
yeah.
told me you didn't have an audience. I thought you told me just you and I talking, having a good time. Yeah, I
No,
was
no,
going to
no.
bring
This
out
is
some drinks and we could have drinks and.
no, this is live. Yeah. So you have Caribbean Insight Television. They say
Oh
welcome Master T.
yeah. That's Mr. Norris and my friends down in Caribbean Inside TV. Yeah, yeah, they do
Okay.
some good stuff. Yeah. Oh my
And
God, yeah, Angela. Yeah, people. My God, yeah. You didn't tell me you have a big fancy audience. I was talking to tonight. You got to invite me back.
oh yeah, for sure. Angela Rambert.
Okay, thank you, Angela, for listening tonight. I hope it was helpful. This is really a great time. And I hope she gets the book. You know, to really share with the audience that you can find me on trevorwilkinsshow.com, and we're streaming live now. Thank you. We're streaming live around the world to every rock in the world on trevorwilkinsshow.com. So on Saturday, you don't have to worry about the radio. You could hear me on trevorwilkinsshow.com. Just click on streaming. It takes you to the stream, and it's like you're in New York and you're hearing it. And then if you're 91.5 FM, because you know what I learned, Mike, is that the bulk of my folks are still on radio because they're in the 60s, the 50s.
Right, exactly. Like,
You know,
like my grandmother.
right.
She's like I said, she's
Yeah,
not.
your grandmother, right? She just turned on the radio and she boom, she's listening. You
Yeah.
know, she's not gonna go like you and I will go on the web and do all that stuff. But again, we have friends in Grenada, friends in Trinidad, friends in Florida, friends in Atlanta, England, who lived in Trinidad, knew the show, and they left, and now they found the show on trevorwilkinsshow.com, so you can listen. Yeah.
And
So
Angela says she enjoyed every minute of this show.
tell her Mike has to invite me again. We are going to do this again, Mike. But again, I appreciate you. I thank you for reading my book, Mike.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
That's impressive. Thank you for reading it. And I was not going to do this, but when you told me, Trevor, I read your book, I said, okay, I'll do it.
You also have this Dale Ross. This is my cousin's cousin.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Dale, all right.
Cousin.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you for tuning in.
And he's watching from Florida.
Oh wow, cool. Yeah.
He lived in New York, but he used to listen to when I told him I was going to be doing the interview. He said, yeah, I listen to Trevor all the time.
Great.
He was living here in New York, but he didn't know. I told him, he said, yeah, I used to listen to it. I said, well, you know, he's online now. He said, really? So now he knows that he can catch you online.
Exactly. Oh, Dale, that's so cool. Thank you, man. He said, oh, great job. Yeah, thank you. Mike, you do an awesome job, man. I love your program. Wow. And I like the fact that you interviewing folks who write books about music and other things, and you deal with other music as well. that is impressive, young man. And God bless you, and keep it up, because we need to share our music and tell our story.
This won't be the last time that I have you on the show. We were only supposed to do 45 minutes, but
Oh my God!
it easily went over an hour.
All right, thank you, Mike.
We're in was 120 minutes or something like
Well, let me just remind the folks, don't forget, you can listen to the show every Saturday, right? 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. And plus, we have a Calypso overtime that goes from 11 to 12. That's on TrevorWilkinsShow.com. But the whole show is simulcast on TrevorWilkinsShow.com. That is one word. And of course, on 91.5 FM, WNYE in New York City, which covers, the tri-state area, New Jersey, Connecticut, and New York City, of course, the 5 boroughs. So, and please get my book, Mike.
Please,
The Greatest Minds in Calypso. Yeah, it's highly recommended, Mike, and they will not be disappointed.
No, you won't. And it's not like it's a big volume book. It's an easy read.
It's an easy read. You'll finish it in 2 hours, and you relax. It's a nice Sunday evening read. You'll see our journey. You'll see the confluences of events that we had that really created this whole thing. 22 and a half years with Desmond James, the great master of Calypso music, the greatest mind. He had the greatest mind in Calypso music. And you'll see, really a culmination of 22 and a half years. And I got to tell you, it was the best time of my life, It was, and Mike, if I said it wasn't difficult, I'm not being truthful. It was extremely difficult because I had to raise the money, research, work with James, and spend time with him, listening to music, organizing. And then I had this, every Saturday, I have this big bag of records. And I'm on the train running to Manhattan to start the show at 8 o'clock in the studio. Now I do it from my house. So I don't have to carry this big bag of records. Records are heavy. 30 records. I played 30 Calypsos per show, And I had to be careful with the records because, this is James. These records are mint condition. I have to take it back.
Wow.
And then when I finish that, Mike, I have to sell it. I have to go and meet people and say, hey, why don't you run some ads on the show? Why don't you help us keep Calypso going? We'll promote your business, your restaurant, your variety stores, your whatever. We'll give you a musical planogram of what you're doing, and we'll keep you in the mix, and and then all the promoters, the parties, you're trying to get some of those parties as well. So it was not easy, but it was a great run. It was exciting.
I'm glad that you had gotten online, because before, years ago, I used to listen to you on the radio station.
Exactly.
And towards the latter years, up to the time like a little before COVID, it became very difficult to listen to the show because of the reception.
Right.
And even now, my poor grandma, when she listens to the show, she has to tap the radio and,
because the pirates are coming in on her, right? The pirates, there's some pirates on my frequency too.
Wow.
So there's a Haitian pirate on my frequency in Brooklyn. So certain parts of Brooklyn, you can't get on the radio. They're just blocking me out. You know what I mean? Flatbush and a little piece of Church Avenue. But I try to encourage people to listen online. There's no interruption and no those.
My goodness! It was when you went online. I said, "Oh man, there's no interruption. No static. You don't have to turn the dial and try to get in between the stations."
That is great, Mike. Thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity.
And you definitely have to come back.
Yeah, we'll do it again. God's willing, we do it again. And say hello to your darling, sweet grandmother for me. And this was a wonderful experience and an opportunity. First time I'm doing this, actually.
Wow, really?
Yeah, first time. So, Again, I hope people go out and get the book, and I hope they check out the show sometime.
Please do, everybody. Check out the show. Purchase the book. It's not expensive. Okay, it's an easy read. You can
Yeah.
see it's thin. It's not,
Yeah, it's an easy read. Yeah, it's not a big book. Yeah.
support. Give some support.
Yeah.
You know. So
Thank you,
yeah.
Mike. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
So I look forward to having you back on the show in the near future.
All right, Mike. You take care and God bless
Okay,
you.
you do the
And
same.
thank you. Yeah, thank you for reading the book. Thanks for this opportunity, Mike.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Take
Awesome.
care.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. So Trevor, you just hit where it says leave studio, and then that'll take you out. Oh boy. Okay, folks. Man, I tell you, we're having such a good time, a real good time. But there will be a next time. Okay. And this was really a pleasure. I am a devoted listener of the Trevor Wilkins show. Saturday nights, it's a sacred night because the Trevor Wilkins show is running. I play the show, I take my notes, when he's giving the history and everything, so it's always a pleasure to listen to that show. And as I said before, his show, he's a real DJ because, again, he gives you an education on the music. And that's very important. You may hear a calypso that you like, and you may not be familiar with that particular calypso, and you may want to go out and buy it. But if the DJ doesn't say who made it, what are you going to do? So that, and among other reasons why I just love that show. So I really hope that people go and support. And again, I'm gonna put the link up again. Okay. And this is, you just go online, trevorwilkinsshow.com. Okay. On Saturday nights. Okay. Trevor starts at 8:00. Okay. You can catch him online if you're not here in New York. Okay. And also if you're in New York and the radio station is, not getting good reception. Also on trevorwilkins.com, you can leave a donation. You'll see when you go to the page, you'll see where it says donate. You can click on that. He gives you the option to pay via PayPal or with debit card. Okay. So yeah, I'm glad you tuned in, Dale. Hopefully next time we can get you in on the panel discussion. That'll be even better. And I definitely thank you for your support. And thank you to everyone who joined in this evening. Thank you to Caribbean Insight Television. Thank you to Angela Rambert. Okay. And thank you to Dale and everyone else. Okay. Who may not be in the chat. All right. And we're going to sign out now. Okay. And I thank you again. All right. And again, tune in to the show for the next. I also have next week, it'll either be next week or the week afterwards. I'm going to have a Jamaican dub poet for those of you who like dub poetry. Okay. So stay tuned for that. All right. So I'm going to sign out. Okay. Take care and good evening. Good night, rather.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.